Hello, everyone. It's good to see you again. How are you, Stephanie?
Very well. How are you, Michelle? Staying
Wonderful.
warm?
I hear it's your birthday month.
And yours.
Yes, we
Yes.
both have a birthday month. That's so cool. So you want to share with us a quick hint or a visual aid as to what we'll be discussing today?
Absolutely. So,
Great.
what the forecast? WTF? We know holidays are approaching with our holiday forecast, which I don't think still anyone could be able to predict. We're still changing every day, minute by minute, with still with the pandemic and other events going on. And then also too, then comes that holiday schedule of having to prepare that for your department since everyone wants off the same days.
I feel like that picture of that man is the perfect representation of how everybody in our industry feels like today, not just because our forecast is nothing that can be compared to historical data, because our seasons are no longer in existence. We were shut down for almost a year, and people are now starting to travel, and what that is doing is not allowing us to know exactly where we're standing. So this is a great representation of how our leaders feel when they're facing that forecast and then going into their scheduling.
Oh,
so walk us through some of what you're seeing out there when it comes to forecasting, Stephanie.
Well, in Florida, this is our prime season time. So we just got off of a busy early half of the month with Art Basel and different holiday events that are happening. But then also too, it's now with how international traveling is going to be affecting travelers of maybe not going, so then staying here in Florida. So where we thought, okay, we might see a dip in the forecast, now we're actually seeing rising, but then it's all pretty much evening out based upon cancellations as well. I know up in the Northeast that they're seeing a lot of changes as well, last minute changes, either going up or down. So it's still, how do you predict what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, or even in 30 days? In 30 days, it's already going to be 2022, which is crazy to think about.
Yes, exactly. I would not want to be in revenue management right now.
Oh
Definitely.
no, not at all.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think that our industry is an industry where we, from a very young steps in our career, we learn how to be adaptable, because it's an industry that shows and proves constant change. Obviously, what 2020 gave us was that extra punch of how are you going to make this happen. And I think that forecasting is definitely one of those subjects where we're all trying to figure things out and adapt and adjust to the constant change as well. Over here on the West Coast, we're seeing that as well, where typically the week of Christmas would normally be somewhat of a softer week, perhaps not so much in gaming, because we have a lot of the Asian community, which perhaps may not celebrate Christmas, and they decide to come out and do a little bit of gambling. But in anything that is not gaming, like resorts, timeshares, we do see a softer week on the Christmas week. Although this year, it's different. It's almost like people just want to get out.
Yeah.
So it's been quite interesting to try to adapt to that and kind of go with the flow.
Yeah, absolutely. And it ties in, what we were talking about with the your employee schedule as well. So you're, trying to go past of, prior to 2019 of how you were saying, it tends to be a softer week. So then, when employees are saying in June and July, hey, we're typically slow in December, can I be off for, these certain dates to be able to spend time with family, or we knowing families coming in to visit. And you're like, yeah, in previous years, this is really how we've shown in forecasting. And like how you said, now it's just changing, where, where you thought would be slower is now seeing a little bit of a push higher and being busier.
Yes, yes, definitely. We haven't seen much snow just yet on the West Coast. So that is kind of helping a little bit, but it's still having the labor crisis that we have and facing what we're facing right now. Like you're saying, December would be typically the 1 month where if we have a lot of team members from Latin America, and December would be the month where we would be okay allowing for a 2 to 3 week vacation, 4-week vacation, where they would go back home and visit family for Christmas and then be back the week of New Year's Eve. But we are so short-handed that we're definitely having to scale back on those approvals.
Yeah.
And I think that, in many instances, your seniority kicks in and now that becomes a bit of a challenge. I know that in the union world, and I know how you feel about scheduling for the holidays in the union world. So I'm gonna let you touch base on that, and I can't wait to hear this.
Yeah, so when being in New York and also too in Vegas is most properties are union properties, and there's strict protocols and restrictions on scheduling. And even if you're changing a person's schedule, maybe they're typically off on Saturday and Sunday, and which so happens when Christmas and New Year's is landing this year, and having to adjust it. And you making sure that you're giving the employees 2 weeks notice if you're changing their schedule, or also too of giving the approvals, as you mentioned, by seniority. But you know what? It's one of my favorite things when it comes to the union guidelines, because it's very black and white. This is the seniority. This is how it is every day, 365. It doesn't matter if it's a holiday or not. These are what the union protocols are. And so that's what management has to follow. And it actually makes the scheduling quite easier, because then you just knowing that you're going based upon your seniority on who's requesting it off. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out for all of the employees, especially if they're newer employees. But at the same time, it just makes life much easier as a manager, being able to do the scheduling, compared to a property that's not union, and you're having employees, that's saying, oh, I've been here for so long, or my family is coming, and how do you now be able to differentiate between the different employees, because everyone's family is very important, but at the same time, you still need to making sure that there's coverage for the guests to be taken care of.
Right. In some of the properties outside of Vegas, because like you said, Vegas is a very unionized, heavy unionized environment. But I have clients I work with in other areas where there's team members that have probably been on property for 25 years. And now they come to you and say, but wait a minute, I've been taking these 2 or 3 weeks in December off for the past 10, 15 years. Why are you telling me now when I haven't seen my family for this long?
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to deal with it when it comes to those very tenured employees that have been have earned those privileges, but now you are so short-handed that it's very difficult to maneuver around it.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I was going to say is anyone who has a union in their house, make sure that you review your agreements. Start reviewing your agreements. Not every agreement is the same. There are houses that perhaps there's properties that may have up to 11 agreements in place. And you have to make sure that sometimes you have the same union, but there's specific agreements for a department or another. Like an example of that could be engineering, where you have electricians and you have carpenters and so it's important that you do get in tune with your agreements. If you're a new leader, make sure that you request those from your manager, and if not, from HR. HR always holds copies of the union agreements. Ensure that you go back and you comprehend the language in it to make sure that you're not making a mistake when you're scheduling for this busy holiday. There may also be pieces on that agreement that call for any time that you need to bring additional labor, like for holidays or to cover shortage. There may be specific rules that you have to follow through with. So it's extremely important that if you haven't looked at your agreement right now and haven't made yourself familiar with it, now it's the time, because the holidays is the one time where team members get very emotional about their time off and about being on the clock for extensive hours. And let's be honest, we've had a very difficult year, being very short-staffed in every department. So our people are just tired by now.
Exactly. And you made a great point of reviewing what the different agreements, if you're a rooms director and overseeing housekeeping, maintenance, and front desk, they could all be represented by different unions and different contracts based upon their position. And then also too, not just about taking the time off, but now if you're calling in for overtime as well, making sure it's just not like, oh, whoever wants to work, but you still need to making sure that you're going through those protocols, just as if it was the middle of July, of how you would go through those protocols of calling people in for overtime and covering shifts. Still needs to be done the way of how it's laid out into the contract.
Yes, and record everything, record those phone calls. When did you call? Which number did you use? Yes, absolutely.
With a witness as well, too. So
ideally.
Yes.
I know. The other thing is, I'd love for us to share a few ideas or tips as to how do you deal with heavy traffic holidays when you are short-staffed. So for example, staggering shifts. Or perhaps it's extending the hours. And again, look at your local regulations. Nevada's regulations are not the same as California, and they're not the same as Washington or Oregon or Colorado or Wyoming. So being in tune with what overtime pay looks like, right? Don't just trust your payroll system. There's some smaller properties that may not have that aligned or in tune, and you need to know exactly how to pay for that holiday. And if you have a union contract in place, understanding what happens after the 8th hour, what happens after the 10th hour. So looking at that, because that's definitely going to allow you to make a better decision when it comes to your budgets.
Yeah, exactly. And even with breaks as well, making sure that you're in coordinates with, if they are working at that 10th hour, where does that now stand with break time? Because it's different than an 8-hour shift or a 7.5-hour shift, whatever the normal shift hour is.
Yes, exactly. What about staggering shifts? What has been your experience, Stephanie?
Well, especially in the housekeeping department. So we know that during the holiday weekends that we tend to see the families are in their rooms a little bit longer. So then being able to stagger, having, works out great is because saying, okay, we now, normal shift is usually 8 a.m. So now we're going to start staggering starting at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. And it's great because now the employees are able to spend the morning with their family and then going into work, instead of at 8 a.m. everyone's standing around because they can't get into any of their rooms because the families are still there. They're getting ready to go for holiday brunch or out to go and see lights and decorations and holiday windows and things like that. So that's when staggering, I think, is great, especially in the housekeeping department. And then even with your evening team and overnight, as well as, being, okay, maybe you need to bring on more employees during the heavy check-in time or checkout time, but then being able to, offering that minimal, 4 hours or minimal shorter shifts as well, just to get in through those peak times, knowing that, okay, the rest of the night is going to be very quiet because families are out already with dinner or they're already back home into the room.
Right. And then the other piece, especially for New Year's Eve, I'm sure New Year's Eve is an interesting one anywhere in the country.
Oh, yes.
But in very specific regions on the West Coast, we have a lot going on and there's a lot of partying. And what that means is your swing or afternoon shift into your overnight shift, you're going to have to move your sections a little differently. You're going to have to place your team members in perhaps different duties that they would have covered any other day before that. And maybe you have a specific restroom attendant in the convention floor, or if you have a gaming floor, you may need to have someone just stationed in the restroom for a specific time frame, especially considering if there are any restaurants or bars around that particular area on the floor. So you will need additional bodies. You will need to stretch those hours a little bit. And I think that is good that we are talking about this now, so then everyone can start preparing for that week where we can be, set up for success, as opposed to trying to scramble right then and there. And most of the time we may have supervisors on the floor that may not be as tenured. So helping them understand why you're doing this and how you're doing it, and allowing them to be a part of the process of deciding how we're going to break these sections, because they are the ones that are on the floor, but making sure that it's a collective schedule, and that we're making a collective decision, so that we are again set for success, as opposed to it being like a major juggling party with balls on fire while we are running a motorcycle.
Yeah, and you're having those WTF moments.
Yes, exactly, right?
We want to be proactive and not reactive.
Yes, definitely. In early on in my career, I was based out of Lake Tahoe area in northern Nevada. And very quickly, I learned that there was absolutely no way that I could have the same sections that I would normally have. And what our guests would do is everyone would go outside, party it up, come midnight, the entire floor was packed with people, but packed literally in a way where you could not move from one section to the other.
Oh, wow.
So we had to make these sections smaller and schedule every supervisor, day, swing, or graveyard supervisors overnight, to make sure that they would come in at that specific time, so that we could have, and we had, we called for leaders for that evening. And for a specific time frame, we had people stationed in several places. And we've created this specific kind of like stations where we would keep the most basic equipment and tools and cleaning supplies for the casino floor to make sure that we could service that area immediate, because it was impossible to walk around. So that model worked very well. So another thing that we were talking about is making sure that, you know, we write those things down. So year over year, you know that there's a model that you created previous year that worked. Let's make it happen next year, and let's model those schedules for the following year, because it makes no sense to reinvent the wheel.
No, not at all. And great to having these conversations of, you know, what's worked for you and, you know, your different properties you've been with, and, you know, for me and what we've seen, and, you know, being able to now give this information out to our audience and our viewers, for everyone to have a successful holiday month. It's the end of the year, time to, you know, make it all count and go out with a bang. A positive.
Exactly. And if you're out there and you had to work, it's okay. This is what our industry does.
Yeah.
Have fun with it. Enjoy it. Enjoy the music. Enjoy the vibe. There's always something fun going on. Just be in the moment. There will be time to rest when that time comes.
Yes. Well, this has been great. We look forward to seeing everyone next week for our next topics that we'll be covering, still all in relation to what's going on in the December month.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. We'll see everyone later.
Thanks, Michelle. Bye.
Bye.